linguist Arabella Coetzee, in the recently published correspondence between herself and Coetzee, explains this phase in a child's development as the ability to build a space in one's own mind for the relationships between others. Coetzee himself depicts this awareness in his fictionalized autobiographies Boyhood and Youth. The young John is very close to his mother. She is the firmest foundation in his life. But he senses with some unease that she has an interior life of her own, that she had a life before he came into being, a life in which there was no requirement upon her to give him the slightest thought. The child has to grasp that the other, usually in the form of the mother, has full personhood, and in doing so, the child intuits the scale of history, that almost unimaginable time, in the words of Roland Barthes, when my mother was alive before me. My mother came into the kitchen on those mornings, often clutching one or another of Coetzee's novels, in a heightened state of intellectual arousal, a state I have since come to know myself. Barthes vividly describes the jouissance, or bliss, that a writerly text can produce in readers by encouraging them to expand beyond the usually passive subject position of the reader and enter instead with the writer into a mutually satisfying interpretation of the text. In his fiction and critical commentary, Coetzee often describes the spark between writer and reader, master and student. He likes to portray teachers and students walking the dangerously blurred line between physical and intellectual attraction. In his correspondence with Coetzee, he mentions reading an interview with the actress Juliette Binoche, in which Binoche says she needs to have an erotic relationship with the directors of her films, or else the work suffers. By this she doesn't mean she sleeps with them, Coetzee writes, but rather as describing the quintessential experience of learning, which is a feeling of growing beyond yourself, of leaving your old self behind and becoming a new, better self, a form of ecstasy. I'm now in my late 30s, the same age my mother was when she was in her most ecstatic phase of engagement with Coetzee's fiction. I've become acquainted, since having children, with the pace of domestic time, the way the mornings rush by and the afternoons pass as slowly as treacle. How the thought deprivation of early motherhood can be worse than the sleep deprivation, how sublime moments of reading and writing must be snatched in the day's natural lulls. Like most people, I feel something akin to terror when I'm asked to respond to Coetzee's work, intimidated by the notion that his complex books are best passed in the rarefied world of the academically ambitious. Yet my own most fulfilling experiences of discussing his writing have in fact taken place in more intimate settings. Once I was old enough to read his novels, the conversations I had about them happened over cups of tea with my mother and sister in the lounge room, or while we prepared dinner together, or during lazy mornings in our pajamas on family holidays. I recently discussed the school days of Jesus with my mother as she rocked my youngest son to sleep in her arms, and later Skyped with my sister, Dovey, who is a scholar of African screen media in London, to talk about an article she co-wrote with our mother on film adaptations of Coetzee's novels a few years back. Her daughter was on her lap, and every now and then we broke into a song to keep her entertained, to buy ourselves a few more minutes of conversation. I feel grateful to Coetzee for introducing another dimension to our lives as women in the same family. We have each for decades been sustained by his work in different ways, and it strikes me as remarkable that Coetzee brought to life characters like Elizabeth Curran, Susan Barton, Elizabeth Costello, who are among the most intelligent women I've encountered on the page. They are mothers who are also thinkers. The one does not have to cancel out the other. The Elizabeths, in particular, pass on to their children not just an emotional legacy, but an intellectual one, sharing with their offspring not only their bodies, wombs, breasts, but the contents of their minds. The adult children in these books don't always respond well to their mother's philosophizing. In fact, they are sometimes...
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.